Hi, I'm Alyssa Rose, and today we are here with John McGuigan. Welcome, John.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us.
No, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Um, John is an ex police officer. He has been training for 12 years professionally. He has a successful dog training and behavior consulting business. He provides seminars all over the world for dog owners and dog trainers, specializing in aggressive and reactive behavior. And he has two dogs, right?
Yep.
So you have Watson, who is a 6-year-old Kelpie mix, and Logan, who is a 5-year
Yep,
old
thereabouts.
American Bulldog.
Yeah.
Yeah, mix. Yeah. Um, John is also a crossover trainer. So, a crossover trainer, for those that don't know, is that generally refers to somebody that started off using primarily corrections in their training and then transitioned over to using primarily positive reinforcement. So, what we want to talk about today is John's journey in dog training and how he crossed over from corrections to positive reinforcement. All right, so the first thing that I want to ask you is to tell us a little bit about your mindset when you were using corrections in dog training.
Okay.
So, like, how old were you, or
So I got my first dog in 2001. So I've been 28, 27, 28. And uh, I didn't know very much about it. So other than didn't have a dog growing up, I would see people using their dogs, working with their dogs and using choke chains. And that's basically just how I thought it was done.
yeah,
And also being my own philosophy on life at that time was about if somebody is doing something wrong, they get told that they're doing it wrong, and there's a penalty for it. So they need to know that they've done it wrong in order that they can change their behaviour and do it a different way.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was basically my kind of mindset with my first two dogs. So I had Bosco, who was a dog to Bordeaux, and then about a year or so later we got Kitty, who was a Neapolitan Mastiff, and it was, I would say that I hardly used any positive reinforcement with them. I mean, it was so rare. Hardly petted them, never gave them a treat for doing anything right. Um, didn't play with, so I wouldn't play tug with them when they came back. Basically just. And a lot of it was the kind of pack leader mentality. So you need to show the dog that you're the boss,
Yeah.
and the dog should do it because you tell them to do it.
Yeah.
You know.
What were your primary goals with them? Like, were there specific behavior issues that you were concerned with, or was it primarily just this is how you set the ground rules?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But then, looking back on it with the knowledge that I have now, I trained my dogs phenomenally well to be reactive and aggressive towards other dogs
Right.
through using this type of training.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so vocal about not training this way now.
Yeah.
The Bosco going through adolescence, being a young male dog, bully breed, mastiff type. He just liked getting into a bit of a scrap with another dog, and I would then correct him. Then I would correct him for the very, very first thought or reaction to the dog.
Yeah.
Um,
And so was that using a prong collar, or
a choke chain initially, and then I moved on to a prong collar.
okay.
And Kitty she was just he was, to put labels on him, I would say he's quite a hard dog, so he could physically hard, so the corrections didn't seem to bother him, like, so he wouldn't like shy away or yelp or come to cower or anything like this. He would just kind of take them.
Yeah.
But Kitty was, I mean, the first time that I corrected her on a collar when she was a puppy. I mean, she was like 12 weeks at the time, and it was like our world had ended.
Yeah.
Didn't like you raising your voice to her. Didn't like harsh movement. No collar corrections. She just like pancaked on the floor, and it would be like
Yeah.
this. So that was probably my first inclination that there was something wrong with it, but it still didn't change what
Right.
it did.
Right. So do you feel Bosco was reactive with dogs, you were trying to use a prong or at first a choke chain and then a prong collar to correct that behavior. So do you feel that it was effective? Do you feel like
No.
no?
No, in a word, no. And I actually think that it started. Okay.
Yeah, I think we were just talking about that. Hold on. I can find an easy cut point. You can ask that question
Okay,
again.
cool.
Just give me 1 second. I don't know why we're getting so much interference.
It's not my microphone, is it?
I don't think so. And your cord, is it wrapped in the pocket?
Yeah.
Let the cord hang behind you if you could.
Okay.
And in fact,
Yeah.
just the
I'll
pack
stick-
itself, you can put it on the ground or on the chair
Yeah.
down there. I think it could be because that
Yeah, it's-
that thing kind of moves sometimes and it
Yeah,
gets
okay.
some interference. You can just put it down on the chair
Oh.
itself. It's all good. Yeah. So if you want to start with that question you just asked again,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that when we roll.
Okay. It was.
Was it effective?
Was it effective?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Stand by for 1 more second. And okay, so you can look at him and ask that question now.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Do you? Okay. Do you think that the training that you were doing with them at that point was effective?
I think overall, no. There was moments in it where it was, so it was effective some of the time in the moment from stopping them. But looking back on it, I think that was the cause of Kitty's aggression towards other dogs, because the other dog approach was a predictor that I was now going to start acting like a maniac
Right.
towards him. And then when the other dog left, I stopped acting harshly.
Yeah.
So the status quo is kind of resumes, and so she would then start reacting to the other dogs. And I always walked the two of them together. So she weighed 66 kilos, which is like 140, 145 pounds or
Wow.
something. And he was round about 50 kilos, so that's 110,
Wow.
you know, so it was a lot of dog.
Yeah.
And yeah, so she actually became more problematic than he was.
Yeah.
And because he was actually a really confident dog. He was really cool. He played well with other dogs when he played. Was really robust, not particularly fearful or anything, but she was just a more insecure dog.
Yeah.
You know.
So short term, it seemed to create kind of like a fix.
Yeah.
Long term, it seemed to exacerbate
Yeah.
some of these issues. How do you feel that training affected your overall relationships with them?
So I was going through a whole bunch of stuff with kind of personal stuff at the time, and when I again looking back, you know what we know now versus what we knew then, and I stopped them from being dogs. So they had very little relationship with each other because I didn't allow them to play because it was too noisy in the house, and they were big, and we had young kids. And so we would then put them outside. As soon as we put them outside, they would stop playing because they wanted to be with us,
Right.
and so on and so on. So when I look back at it now and I think about how much Logan and Watson solicit our attention in the house, you know, and will come up and want petted and want to be stroked and want to play.
Yeah.
That was non-existent with my dogs. They just left me. They basically were kind of housemates.
Yeah.
You know, they lived in the house, I lived in the house, I provided food for them, and I took them out for walks, and
Right.
that was it was not a good life for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. What was the pivotal moment for you where maybe you first learned about positive reinforcement training, or you first kind of realized that there was some potential there to incorporate this into your relationship with your dogs?
Yeah. So my partner she had trained she had a little lurcher before, and she trained her own dog using positive reinforcement training, and she'd been trying repeatedly to suggest a different way, but because no, this is the way that I do it.
Yeah.
This is and you know yourself when
Yeah.
your partners or your spouse is like the worst person to be giving you advice. You need
Yeah.
an outside influence.
Yeah.
So she had put me to a behaviourist locally, and I had a mixed experience with this behaviourist, but generally what happened was we went back, and I was really, really, really resistant to it. Now I've got a bachelor's degree in immunology and microbiology. I came from a scientific background,
Yeah.
and we'd done a little bit of biology and a little bit of psychology as well in high school and stuff. And she was explaining to me, going through the whole process, and she said, eventually I said to her, all right, so it's kind of like Pavlov's dogs, and she says it's not kind of like Pavlov's dogs, it is Pavlov's dogs. She says that's what I'm asking you to do. That's the process that you've gone through, and that was it was like a kind of road to Damascus moment. It was like the skies opened up, and and then it was so clear. I was okay, right. I completely understand why we shouldn't be using corrections now.
Right.
And probably from then on, within, I would say probably within 3 months, I pretty much stopped physically correcting her. He died quite quickly after it. He died a couple of months later. He had heart failure.
Yeah.
So I really only had the opportunity to do this work with Kitty.
Okay.
And I think I was not using physical corrections almost immediately or within a couple of weeks, and I think it was 6 months before I stopped using verbal corrections
That's
as well.
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and it was a real sticking point. It was really it was real resistance. And then there was a guy that I worked with who was a cop, and Andy was this. And I've known Andy since I was 19. He actually I get mugged when I was 19, and Andy was the investigating officer.
Okay.
So a huge big rugby player, and he'd got a new puppy, and he had Paul Owen's book, and I was speaking to him about it, and he said we're just chatting, and he said I said, what does he say about corrections? And he says he doesn't say anything about them. And I said, how does that work? And he says, I don't know.
Yeah.
He says, just follow what it says in the book.
Yeah.
He says, and he had glorious. And because Paul Owens is such an awesome human being and has written these 2 phenomenal books, Andy just followed it, and he said, but it works.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
yeah, and then if looking at this kind of big city rugby player detective, if he can do this to his dog, then I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that as well.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. So the scientific link, and then also just seeing others practicing it and being inspired by that. How do you feel that positive reinforcement training influenced your relationship with Kitty and then also with your current dogs?
So with Kitty, we basically what I did was, and I had no clue what I was doing. It was they basically said, see a dog, provide chicken. That was it.
Yeah.
So they'd explained it almost they had explained it from a purely classical conditioning approach. So making that association, dogs mean chicken, dogs mean chicken. But then you're also getting those other behaviours that she's disengaging from the dog, she's eating the food, so she started to relax. And then about 7 to 9 months after we had started this process, I was at the park, and she met a young border collie who was about a year old, and went up and did a tentative introduction, and she played out, and I hadn't seen that in years.
Awesome.
And I was like, okay, so she's starting to recover from the hard time that I'd given her. So really, really, really joyous moment, and she played about. I let her off the leash, and they just ran around.
That's really cool.
Yeah, really nice. And that was then happening. That happened repeatedly over the next year or so. She would see dogs at the park. I knew she was going to be cool, and she would just go and play with them. Really, really nice stuff. And still occasionally she would have a little bit of a spat with another dog, but well within normal range of dog behaviour, and the level of aggression was tiny.
Yeah.
You know, so
Very
lots
cool.
of the stuff she would do, she would roll another dog. So she would barrel forward, hit the dog with her chest, and roll the dog and hold it down. So just kind of obnoxious social stuff,
Yeah.
you know, rather than proper aggression, you know.
Yeah.
But that was rare and got rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
So
All right. That's really cool. So
Yeah.
just seeing some of those healthier
yeah,
behaviors coming through. How do you feel that positive reinforcement has affected you in other ways? Do you feel like it's kind of carried over into other areas of your life?
yeah. It coincided with when I started learning this stuff. I'd been in uniform in a really rough area of the city where everything was about, again, it's just guy stuff. Guys in their in their late teens and in their 20s, and hopefully we start maturing when we're in our 30s. Many of us not until we're in our 40s, and even then, still lots of us still don't. So it coincided with me leaving uniform and going into plainclothes work, and that was a big wake up call for me as well, because the uniform presence then it's a less forceful presence there because you're dressed like this,
Right.
and also people see you as a person and not as a uniform,
Yeah.
not as a cop. So I would see people interacting differently with me, and then I would start interacting with them differently. And as a child, I was actually a kind of really gentle and mild child, and then my life got in the way, and I ended up as bitter and cynical as I am just now. But it helped me get back to some of that, you know. And I remember one night going to a house, and we were arresting a guy on a warrant, and he wasn't happy, you know. He was just not happy about that he was going to jail. And I made a compliment. He was a recovering heroin addict, and I complimented him on his flat, on the decor of his flat. And at first I think he thought I was being belligerent, you know. And I said to him, no, it's really nice. I says, did you do this yourself? And he says, I did most of it. And I said, you made a cracking job of it. And I saw him like that changing, and then we chatted. He was no problem afterwards,
Yeah.
you know. And so I was then thinking, yeah, there's something in this.
Yeah.
I was then in the drugs unit, and you would do a drugs raid, but then you would have to talk to the person. So if you found drugs on them, you'd then have to interview them.
Right.
So there's no point. You go in and you'd be forceful in order for the safety part of it, so that nobody's getting injured. But then once the guy's in handcuffs, that's it, done.
Yeah.
You then have to go in and interview him. So you need to not be nice to him, but you need to at least be personable to him, so
Right.
that he'll talk to you and you can get your job done. But if you
Right.
go in like a total hard ass, he's not going to talk to you, you
Yeah.
know. So you would be charming and funny and get him a cup of tea, and some of the guys had a real problem with that because he's a scumbag, he's a drug dealer.
Yeah.
I get it, he is.
Yeah.
You know, but we've
Yeah.
got a job to do.
Yeah.
And the objective is to get him to admit that he's dealing drugs.
Yeah.
You know, and if we have to be nice to him to do that, we go home.
Right.
You know, we win by locking him up.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, no, we need to win at every single. We are
Right.
winning.
Yeah.
The objective is complete.
Yeah.
So it changed my attitude towards work. Then I changed team, and the role that I had was challenging, and I was then top punitively going into that team, but then I became more senior in the team, and we had a good bunch of guys, and we decided when the new guys come in, we're actually going to teach them, you
That's
know.
cool.
So if you don't know what to do, we're going to show you how to do it, we're going to remind you how to do it, and we're going to help you out,
Right.
and we're going to recognise that you're doing the best that you can,
Yeah.
you know.
So it's almost like multi-layered,
Yeah.
right? So you're changing. It's affecting the way that you're interacting with the people that you're interviewing,
Mhm.
right? It's affecting your relationship with your coworkers,
Yeah.
right? And so it's all based on finding that connection and improving communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then with my kids are now 17 and 19, and I wish I'd have known when they were tiny what I know now.
Yeah.
But since I started learning this stuff, they cannot remember me raising my voice to them. Well, once I think, once or twice, but out of 36 years combined, I think that's okay.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's all right.
Yeah.
They don't ever remember me lifting my hands to them. If there's a problem, we sort it out. And Yeah, so but that's actually how I want to live my life.
Right.
You know.
And again, there's trust, and they know to go to you
Yeah.
when there's an issue.
Yeah, and they work hard. They're kind. They're funny. They're good with their friends. They're good with their family.
Yeah.
They both have jobs. They both study.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not as if we didn't put any boundaries or rules in place.
Yeah.
You know, so it can be done,
Yeah.
and I know it can be done because I've done it.
So my last question to you is, do you have advice for people that are receiving recommendations to use a more aversive approach to training? So putting a prong collar on their dog, or using a spray can, or that type of thing.
I think there's a number of things which get in the way of this. That Susan Friedman, who I've learnt a lot from, one of the things that she says is, if we taught children what behaviour is for, the same as we teach them their ABCs, their colours and shapes, then we wouldn't have as many problems as we do.
Yeah.
So because we have a cultural misunderstanding of behaviour, and we don't understand globally as a race that all beings on the planet learn under the same rules, that gets in the way. So when I use a lot of, so if you watch any of my social media stuff, you'll see me using, I use human analogies a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the criticisms that people will say is, but it's a dog. Yeah, I get it's a dog, but the rules are the same. You know,
Yeah.
we just need to adapt the rules, make the rules clear. This is the behaviour you need to do to access this result.
Yeah.
Under these conditions. So I say, what I generally say is, if you start understanding the rules are the same across the board, and then start putting yourself in the position. So imagine a work scenario where your boss was treating you the same way. So one, how would you feel?
Yeah.
And two, how would you perform?
Right.
You know.
Absolutely.
So it's just putting yourself in that position.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, thank you
No,
so
thank
much.
you.
I really appreciate you coming out, and this has been incredible.
Yeah,
Very
thanks very much.
valuable insights.
Yeah.
That I think will be really helpful to people. So if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
So you can get me on YouTube, which is Glasgow Dog Trainer and Behaviour Consultant. The same on Facebook, and the same on Instagram. And then my website is glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk as well. So you can reach me there.
Very cool. Thank
Okay.
you, John.
No, thank you.
All right, and thanks for everyone tuning in, and stay tuned for more videos in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.